district, immediately you want to go, you want to be there. But again, their concern is that if everyone shows up to the middle school, the elementary school, and of course the high school all at once, that is going to impede what they're trying to do, which is to make sure they can continue their investigation. So again, if you are a parent, the key word there is that everything has been contained. They believe that everything is safe. This suspect is now in custody and there is no immediate threat to that area. But understandably, parents still want to be there and reunite. And as he said in that news conference, that is one of their goals and their priorities right now. I'm on social media right now on Instagram Live. We're seeing people comment from Riverdale. We're seeing someone saying Phoenix, Arizona is carrying 11 alive right now as we are given this information. So there is outpouring of support and love coming from everywhere. But just in case, let's go ahead and set up sort of the boundaries and where we are. A lot of people think Georgia, you automatically think Atlanta. No, this is happening about 45 minutes northeast of the city. And so producers have sort of put together a map for you so that we can give you perspective on where all of this is happening, even in regards to the trauma centers where 2 of those patients were taken. You see Appalachian High School there in Barrow, and then you see Atlanta. And so we're talking about at least a 45-minute to an hour drive away from the city where we are following this situation here as it relates to Northeast Georgia Medical Center and Grady. Unfortunately, both of those locations were about an hour in the opposite direction to get those injured people to those level 1 trauma centers. One person brought to Atlanta to Grady. Another person stayed there in the county and went to that one in Gainesville. And then one other person was able to go to the smaller hospital in Barrow. We have not gotten word on where the 4th injured person has gone. Again, these numbers coming from NBC News, 2 dead and 4 injured there in the shooting. And Aisha, we have a number of reporters, of course, there near the high school and at the hospital. We want to get right out now live to 11 Alive's Molly Oak. Molly, what can you tell us? What's the update?
Well, you know, Jonathan, when I was talking with Aisha and Cheryl earlier, we talked about how this isn't only affecting the people right here inside of the school, but really the entire community. And I want to speak to that as I step aside so you get a closer look. We are now right across the street from the school. You're seeing that law enforcement presence. But we talk about the community response. I talked with a woman. Now, her child does not go to this school, but her neighbor's child does. That neighbor calls her, says, I'm an hour away. There's been a shooting at my son's school. How quickly can you get there? That neighbor gets here as quickly as they can. They have to park their car, ditch the car, walk 2.5 miles just to lay some eyes on her senior. Now, that senior is okay, but he did tell her some information. He said that he was in the 10th grade hallway. That's where his classroom was when the shooting happened. He said he was in the classroom right across from the other classroom, and that classroom is where the shooting was happening. Now, when that woman came to try to pick him up, she said she was only able to talk with him for a little bit and see him to physically know that he is okay. But she says he actually has to stick here on the football field. We told you earlier that they moved those students onto the football field. Now she's telling me any students who saw or heard anything are now getting interviewed by the GBI, which could take hours. So she said she was heading out when we spoke with her. Again, just lots of hugs and compassion coming from the community, knowing that the kid was okay. But she said the mom's about 5 minutes away to come and just wait on him to be done. But again, GBI, we're being told, is interviewing students on the football field who may have heard or seen anything. Also talking to a parent and a grandmother just now who are actually trying to pick up their 8-year-old who goes to a school down the street. She says they are also on lockdown, so she's not even sure if she'll be able to get to her baby. But she says, again, that sentiment of not just hearing that your child is okay, but physically being able to see them, to touch them and hold them. That is really what the feeling of emotion is out here right now, Aisha and Jonathan. But again, we cannot express just the mass amount of law enforcement. And again, it's not just here in the county. GBI telling us earlier, it is local, state, federal. We are seeing police and sheriffs from all over. I mean, just across from me, I see Henry County Sheriff. I see City of Monroe Police. I see Walton County Fire Rescue. So this is a state investigation. GSP passing through as well as GBI continues this investigation. We did get that small update a little bit ago from that press conference, hoping to hear more from the sheriff's office here as well. But for now, we're going to toss it back to you. But again, just a lot of law enforcement and a lot of parents here on scene just wanting to give their kids a hug and know that they're okay.
Yeah, you can understand that. Molly Oak Live for us. Thank you so much. One of the things that stood out that Molly said is that some of these students, we got to remember, they witnessed this. They were in the classroom. That student that Molly spoke to, or at least the guardian said that they heard the gunfire from the 10th grade hallway. Yeah. They could see people panicking. So for some of these students, they saw this, they heard this firsthand.
Just such a tragedy here. In a video a few minutes ago, Jonathan, we saw one of the students walking away, just sort of holding his face, T-shirt over his face as he was walking away with the loved one that he was finally reunited with. He just looked just beside himself, just kind of considering what they witnessed, what they heard, and just, you know, for years to come, just thinking about this day. 11 Live's Doug Richards standing by there on the ground. Doug, you were at that press conference there with the sheriff. I heard your question there at the end, trying to see if this suspect was a student or an adult. They're pretty tight-lipped, but understandably so here with just how evolving this situation is. But what can you tell us right now?
Truthfully, not a lot more than what you heard at the press conference, except to say that we're standing on the grounds of a high school that is obviously in a very unusual condition. There are hundreds of people on foot between here and the mile and a half or so we walked to get here, going back and forth. Folks who were coming on foot to investigate the status of their students in the school. One lady who said that she came here actually saw the student but was unable to leave the student, leave with the student because the GBI was poised to investigate that student, and so as a result was unable to leave, but at least had gotten the assurance that the child was okay. And there's a lot of that, it appears, going on here where adults are showing up, getting an assurance that their child was not among those harmed or among those folks who may be still in any kind of danger, and the indication is that the danger is past. Nonetheless, obviously there are scores, if not hundreds, of law enforcement folks here who are making sure that that's the case, assisting in the ongoing investigation, and trying to wrap this thing up. They sounded pretty confident that there was going to be able to be a release of further information at 4 o'clock, which is 2.5 hours from now. So they seem confident that a lot of the investigative details that they need to have, that they can release, will be wrapped up in that relatively short period of time. In law enforcement clocks, not, you know, some of us may be impatient, but obviously, as you said, they want to get it right, and they want to make sure that they don't want to have to backtrack on any information that is released initially, just because it can turn into a bad look both in court as well as, you know, in the public sphere. So that's where we are now at the high school, where we are still seeing parents and still seeing lots of law enforcement, and have had an assurance that the investigation is in a place where it's advancing as it should do. Back to you.
All right, Doug Richards there. Thank you so much. Looking forward to that press conference there at 4 o'clock if they're able to give us information. Let's sort of reset. I got 11 Live's Jonathan Martin in with me now. Jennifer Bellamy standing by to tap out to go into our afternoon shift. You're looking at video from earlier from the 11 Alive Sky Tracker that was over the scene very early on here as law enforcement officers got 1,900 kids enrolled at Appalachia High School to safety out of the building there to the football field. That was a safety location as they worked to secure the perimeter and to secure the building, as you saw those crews responding there. What we know is this call came in around 9:30. That was the latest time that we got from the sheriff. Initially, we were told 10:23 that first call came in. Regardless, it was early in the day as students were even before the lunch hour. Calls of shots fired from Appalachia High School. They got to the scene and discovered the shooting had indeed taken place. Results that we got about 2.5 hours later here, Jonathan, was that 2 people were dead and 4 were injured. And that came from NBC News. But as we saw in that press conference, the sheriff was very slow to put a number to anything, including ages of that person who was in custody, any of that. So they are walking a real thin line with what they are releasing here.
Absolutely, saying that he is not giving any details right now on injuries, just calling the situation still fluid and the investigation early. But again, he reiterated, for anyone wondering, 1 suspect now in custody, and they do say that they have the situation contained. So again, this is some video you're looking at from earlier when the scene there was very much more active there at WXIA High School. Really, the priority now, as we heard from law enforcement, is to make sure that parents, as many as they can be reunited with their students. You can understand that this is such a emergent shocking situation for a lot of parents. They just want to be there, perhaps to just see their kids in person, hug them. But obviously, there's a concern with getting parents connected in terms of traffic. They have encouraged parents from the middle school and elementary school not to block the roadways. They're going to give more information soon on when those students from the other schools nearby that are on lockdown can be released. And again, as Aisha said, we are expecting another news conference around the 4 o'clock hour. Could be sooner, could come later, but that's when we expect the next update from police. But again, right now from NBC, they're reporting 2 people dead, 4 injured in the shooting. Again, we do not know the extent of the injuries. We do not know details on the suspect. If it was perhaps a student at the school, an adult, a juvenile, we just don't know. I'm joined now by 11 Alive evening anchor Jennifer Bellamy, who will be joining us as we continue our coverage. And Jennifer, this all unfolded today around 9:30. That's when those first calls came into police. Police responded around 10 or so and realized that this indeed was an active shooter and a really serious situation.
And really such a scary situation for these families as they started to get that messaging from those students there on campus, and also for family members of anyone who has a loved one who is a part of this WXIA High School family, whether they're a teacher or working there on the staff in some other capacity. So this is the information, the call, the text messages that nobody ever wants to hear. But again, that is unfolding right now out of Barrow County. Right now, you are looking at images from our 11 Alive Sky Tracker that we have been getting for you throughout the morning as the situation has unfolded. And we're continuing to work all of our sources to get you more information. Again, we know from NBC News reporting right now, 2 dead, 4 injured in a shooting there at WXIA High School in Barrow County.
And a large police presence, Jennifer, there, of course, as you might expect. We have seen agencies, including the GBI, members of the FBI, multiple local agencies, and some from Atlanta there in this county as a part of this investigation. And as we heard from law enforcement during the update just about 20 minutes ago, they are still very much in the early stages of figuring out what happened. One of the things they're doing right now is interviewing some of those students. As we heard from our Molly Oak, who was there, she spoke with the guardian of one of those students who said that he heard the gunfire in the 10th grade hallway. Some students perhaps witnessed this by hearing it or seeing it firsthand. So they're interviewing a lot of those students while other students have been reunited with their parents and are allowed to leave for the day.
And you talked about how early this is in this investigation. So early, in fact, that the sheriff did not want to give many details at this hour when he addressed the media about this situation. He did say that he hoped to come back at about 4 o'clock. So in just a couple hours from now, we hope that we will hear from the sheriff and get more information about what is going on. We understand from the Barrow County Sheriff's Office that 1 suspect is in custody. It's not clear right now if there's anybody else or how else this investigation is unfolding. Oftentimes in these situations, law enforcement will go visit the home of a suspect and they'll look in other aspects of that life with their family as well. And so we will be following this investigation for you over the next couple of days and weeks and months, even as law enforcement continue to piece together everything that happened here and try to answer the question of why.
And Jennifer, we just got just a heartbreaking update. Our producers in our ear saying that CNN now reporting, again, CNN reporting 4 dead, approximately 30 injured. Again, that is coming from CNN, which is, of course, a greater number than what we had heard originally from NBC reporting. just heartbreaking when you see that, knowing how many people, how many families affected by what happened there today. We did know that the sheriff was very tight-lipped, very slow to really give any numbers. He knew that there was various reporting out there, and perhaps this is why, because they knew that this perhaps was much worse than anyone originally thought.
Yeah, and again, this is an unfolding situation. When you talk about people who are injured in a situation like this, you just don't know what injured means. It could mean something very minor, and it could be something extremely serious. And we are talking about at least one person we know being transported all the way out from Barrow County to Grady Memorial Hospital here in the city of Atlanta. When you hear about something like that, you know that it's very serious. For them to be transported such a distance for medical treatment and attention. And so, again, we are hoping that these numbers do not continue to shift anymore with this new information. CNN reporting 4 dead, about 30 injured so far.
And you just think about how many people, how many families impacted by this, so many students there, some 1,900 students who attend this high school. If you're unfamiliar with this area, this is about, I believe, about 45 miles, 45 minutes or so outside of the Atlanta area, but still affecting so many people in that community and beyond. We know Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens has been informed. He has really reinforced security at some of Atlanta public schools, just because, again, when things like this happen, it really affects our whole community and beyond. We know Governor Brian Kemp has also pledged any resources, pushed all resources necessary to that area, and this even making it all the way to the White House with the president being briefed on what's happened as well.
And you talk about this situation and the ripple effect. We know that there will be a major impact to this community, but it does have a ripple for all of the students across Georgia and across the nation. You mentioned the president being briefed on the situation. It does have that ripple effect. And I'm sure there are other school districts across Metro Atlanta that are also increasing their security as the school day is coming closer to an end for so many other students across Metro Atlanta. Right now, these are images that you're seeing we took from our 11 Live Sky Tracker and the ground from earlier in the day. And we know that those students were taken out to safety to that football field. That's what you were seeing just a short time ago on your screens. And we understand that that was a location that was deemed safe for those students. And again, we understand that they are working on reuniting parents and guardians with their students at this point. But again, that is going to be a lengthy and difficult process for them to undertake to make sure that these parents and students are reunited and that these students are able to make it home safely.
Yeah, and I think when a lot of people were watching this unfold, you saw just the number of ambulances there on the grounds of the school. You saw some of the helicopters taking at least a couple people away by life flight, and you had the feeling that this may be worse than, again, we first thought. Again, CNN right now reporting 4 dead, approximately 30 injured. We don't know the extent of those injuries. But again, unfortunately, this is turning out to be a lot more serious of a situation than we thought. Right now, again, some of those schools are on lockdown. You can see our Molly Oak in this picture. She is there among our reporters, along with Doug Richards and others who are gathering information and talking to parents and students and law enforcement as much as we can at this point.
And unfortunately, we talk now about students having to practice for situations like this at school. It used to be a time when you practiced for hurricanes and you practiced for tornadoes, but practicing for a mass shooting or an intruder on campus is something that is a reality for our students, unfortunately, nowadays. And this is actually unfolding for them. And this is something that will unfortunately change their lives for as long as they live. And this is something that we are unfortunately having to deal with. So many times we do hear about different incidents and situations happening on our school campuses. And fortunately, for the most part, some of them do not amount to what we are seeing happen today. But again, this newest information, this reporting from CNN now saying 4 dead, approximately 30 injured. Those numbers have increased from NBC's reporting earlier this afternoon that 2 were dead and 4 injured.
That's right. And just heartbreaking when you think about the number of people impacted by what's happened today. You're taking a live look near the area where you can see just a number of people now leaving the school, heartbroken, leaving the school without answers. Some of them not knowing if their friends, their loved ones, their classmates were impacted by this.
Yeah, we're going to go live now to our Molly Oak, who is out there on the ground. She's been out there for some time speaking with family members. And Molly, this is really just a difficult situation for anyone showing up there with their heart in their throat, wondering what is going on and why.
First time that I checked in with you all, that the only thing that rivals the amount of law enforcement here on scene is just the amount of loved ones that are trying to get there. I want to step aside so you can see a helicopter air evacuation life team, it looks like it says on the side, is lifting off here from the scene again as we work to figure out more details of all that's happening here. The GBI has told us that this is not only a local investigation, but also a federal and state investigation. I want to go back to what I was saying earlier, though, just the amount of parents we've seen. We've had people, neighbors, friends of family members tell us that they parked their car, had to walk 2 miles, 3 miles just to get to the school, just to try to lay some eyes on their loved ones, to know that they're okay. I mean, just off camera, I can't tell you the amount of hugs I've shared with people when they've told me that they found out that their child is okay, that their grandchild is okay, that their neighbor's child is okay. So when you talk about the impact that this type of event has on not only a school, but also just the community. We've seen neighbors stepping in because they may be 30 minutes closer than a parent to come and rush over here just to make sure that their friend's child is okay. And again, when we talk about the kids, they are on the football field right now. That's what parents are telling me, that the kids were moved over to the football field for safety and also just to be spoken to. One parent tells me that one of the kids, he was a senior, said he was in the 10th grade hallway, though that's just where his classroom happened to be, said his classroom was across the hall from a classroom where the shooting happened. She says that while she was able to see him and talk with him for a little bit, make sure he was okay physically, she said mentally he's pretty shaken up, but she did say that he heard that gunfire. And she said now the GBI is interviewing students, so it may be a couple of hours before parents can physically take those students and then bring them home to safety, which is a different level of safety than being at a school where something like this just happened. It's to have that kid home with you and in your arms. That's a sentiment that we're hearing over and over again, not just to hear your child being safe, but also being able to physically see them and hold them. We want to get to some sound from people to better describe what's been happening out here.
Because his 12th grade class is on a 10th grade hall, he can't be released until GBI interviews everyone.
Tell me why that is.
Because they want to know what you heard, what you may saw, how you felt, just that.
You said his classroom was right across?
Yeah, he actually heard the shooting. He's like, they're shooting right across from my classroom. And his mom is en route. She's like 5 minutes away.
Okay.
So I just wanted to put eyes on him to see that he was okay. And he knows that he's safe, and God got him. I can't imagine what she's going through trying to get here in traffic to put eyes on her son.
You know, with the people that I've spoken to, they've been trying to hold it together, and you can tell they're trying to keep that strength because there's just so much going on. You can see in their eyes, you can see in their hands that they are physically shaken up, whether it is their son, their daughter, their grandson, their granddaughter, their friend, their neighbor's kid that they may have met once or twice. This is an emotional time out here, and you're really seeing the entire community pull together. You're seeing the community pull together. You're seeing law enforcement from multiple agencies pull together. Again, we're talking local, state, and federal. I mean, just standing here, we're seeing Henry County Sheriff's Office. I'm seeing City of Monroe Police. I'm seeing Walton County Fire Rescue. I'm seeing GBI. We're seeing GSP. I see Gwinnett County Sheriff has set up a command center. So there's just sheriff, police, law enforcement from counties across the state coming in to help and try to hold this community together during so much devastation. Guys.
And you can understand why. Molly Oak Live Force there talking with parents, talking with a neighbor of one of the students who heard what happened. She mentioned in the 10th grade hallway, that student among many right now who are still at the school being interviewed by the GBI, asking what they heard, what they saw. You can see from this shot from earlier, just the sheer number of students. I believe the school is home to some 1,900 students. Many of them have now gone home with their parents or been allowed to leave. Others, again, staying behind as this investigation we know is still very much fluid and active.
And these are the stories that we're starting to hear now. Earlier in the day, I was watching our coverage from home, and I heard another loved one that Molly spoke with saying that one student was near the principal, and the principal just told them to run and don't look back. That is something that is unimaginable to hear that your student had to be told, that your student heard gunshots across the hall. And we know right now that, as you would imagine, so many family and friends are working to get to that school. Molly telling us just now that people are walking for miles to make it to the school, to reach their young students here at this high school. And that is something that will continue on through the evening as law enforcement and school officials are working to reunite family members. We see a lot of people trying to stand in the gap here for other family members, grandparents, friends, neighbors, just trying to locate and track students for other parents who are still in process of trying to get out there. And so even in the midst of this, we do see so many aspects of the community coming together, along with so many various municipalities and law enforcement agencies coming together to try and help aid in the response to this shooting.
Again, if you were just joining us, you may have noticed that the situation appears to have gotten a lot worse, a lot more serious, with 4 dead now being reported by CNN. According to law enforcement they've spoken with, and approximately 30 injured. Again, as Jennifer pointed out, we don't know if those injuries are related to gunshot wounds, but we know at least a couple of them are, according to what we've been hearing. At least 1 or 2 of those have been taken by life flight to Grady Hospital, where they are being treated. We don't know, the extent of all of the injuries. And as far as the suspect, CNN reporting that the student, this person rather, is of student age. We don't know if that is a student at the school, but apparently a young person, according to CNN, is a suspect that they have in custody.
And again, there are so many questions left unanswered at this hour. We did hear from the sheriff not too long ago, but as this investigation is unfolding, we did not get many answers. The sheriff not taking questions at that point. We do expect to hear from the sheriff later on this afternoon, possibly around 4 o'clock. And hopefully at that point, we can get some more information, some more details about what unfolded here, who is among those who are dead and injured, and what we know so far about the suspect who the sheriff's office says is now in custody. Jonathan, we were talking about the injuries and how it's hard to know without concrete information what those injuries include. But we know that right now there's going to be a lot of mental health situations that need to be addressed as well with these students dealing with such a thing happening in their early lives, and seeing this happen to possibly other students, teachers, and staff members at this school, people that they know and potentially saw every day. This is going to take a lot of work and support for this entire community to move forward.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Jennifer, students prepare for things like this these days. Unfortunately, it is part of going to middle school, high school, even as Cheryl pointed out, sometimes earlier, even in elementary and even preschool, you prepare for these types of drills, but you hope that you never have to actually live this out. You ever have to be in these situations. And so for many of these students, we saw them living this out today, running from gunfire, hearing gunfire. And this is what we saw unfold today at this school for these 1,900 students in the middle of what everyone described who witnessed it as a chaotic scene.
Yeah, and this story having far-reaching effects beyond just this Barrow County community, beyond just Metro Atlanta, beyond the state of Georgia. We have heard that President Joe Biden has been briefed on the situation, and we're hearing now from U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland. Let's listen to some of what he had to say.
But before we begin, I want to address the tragic shooting that occurred this morning at a high school in Winder, Georgia. We are still gathering information, but the FBI and ATF are on the scene, working with state, local, and federal partners. I'm devastated for the families who have been affected by this terrible tragedy. The Justice Department stands ready to provide any resources or support that the Winder community needs in the days ahead.
And that was U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland offering some remarks following this deadly shooting at WXIA High School. Again, this information coming from CNN at this hour that 4 people have been killed or 4 people are dead, and that about 30 have been injured as a result of whatever unfolded out here at WXIA High School. We have heard from Grady Hospital earlier, at least, that 1 person was being treated there with a gunshot wound. But again, we have not received many details from the sheriff's office regarding exactly what happened and how.
Yeah, and if there is any positive news at this hour, it is that the suspect is now in custody, and police have said, and they have reiterated that the situation is now contained. We do know still a number of schools in the area, including the elementary school and middle school, are on lockdown at last check. We are waiting an update from police. They did say, at least the sheriff said, that they would be working to get those schools off lockdown and those parents allowed to come pick up their students. We are expecting another update, an official update from the sheriff around 4 o'clock this afternoon. But as of last check, there are still a number of schools on lockdown as they continue investigating and continue to have this large police presence around the high school there.
So as this investigation is in very early stages for law enforcement out there in Barrow County, we also know that a big undertaking underway right now is reuniting parents and students. And as Jonathan just mentioned, this isn't just at WXIA High School. This is at other surrounding schools in Barrow County as well, also placed on lockdown. Parents working to get to those students as well at this hour. And so that is something that we are working to get more details on. As soon as we have more information, we'll of course continue to pass that information along to you. Any updates about this process that we learn, we will be sharing with you guys on air and online. You can also find more details always as we are continuing to follow this on our website, 11alive.com, and inside our 11 Alive News app, because this is an ongoing situation and we're continuing to get new information in moment by moment.
That's right. And we expect, again, more information to come shortly. You're looking right now at some video that we shot earlier, and you can really just see the large, incredible police presence that was there. As I mentioned earlier, we started to see more and more law enforcement, more and more medical staff, ambulances, even some medical helicopters showing up on the scene, giving us a sense of just how serious the situation was. And as we have learned within the last 20 minutes or so, it appears the number of those who have died and the number of those injured has gone up significantly from just what we knew earlier this morning.
And you talked about that medical helicopter. We even saw one live when Molly was reporting just a short time ago, still arriving out there at WXIA High School. And so this is a situation that while police say it's contained, it is still ongoing, still taking place. We know law enforcement are still out there on the ground going through this situation and this investigation piece by piece, because this is something that everyone in that community will no doubt want to be done precisely.
significantly less since we've been here, probably in the past 30 minutes or so. When we first arrived here, we saw people basically just parking their cars wherever they could find a spot, grabbing their stuff and just walking. I talked with one woman who said she parked and walked 2.5 miles just to try to lay some eyes on her neighbor's child, because that neighbor was about an hour away. We've talked with grandparents, parents, loved ones, again, neighbors. So this is really impacting the entire community out here, Jonathan.
Our Molly Oak live for us. Thank you so much for giving us an update. As Molly said, this is really what it has looked like for the last 3 or 4 hours, as police have again reiterated that this is still very much early. In fact, the sheriff said it may take several days for them to really get to the bottom of the initial answers as to what happened here.
That's right. And in our speaking with Molly, we have been hearing different stories from family members and loved ones out there on campus. That neighbor that you heard Molly speak of, saying that the student she was there to just check on, to lay eyes on, being interviewed along with so many others right now by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And that is just a piece of this investigation that will take days or weeks or months for law enforcement to shore everything together, to answer all of these questions, to dot all these I's and cross all these T's, to get answers for the community about what took place here today.
And again, the priority right now, according to the sheriff, of course, getting some of these parents who are at these schools waiting in traffic perhaps to get reunited with their students, getting them reunited. That, I mean, as a parent, you just obviously know that is priority. You want to make sure that your child is okay. But as we're hearing, some 30 injured, you would assume that a good number of those are students. We don't know the breakdown of students, staff, teachers, but again, everyone in that school perhaps knows someone who might have been affected by this. This is not a huge school, 1,900 students, which is, of course, a big high school, but you would imagine that everyone perhaps knows someone who might have been affected by this.
Yeah, and when we talk about checking on your loved one, hearing from a text message or getting a phone call certainly doesn't feel like enough in a situation like this. People want to see and hug and hold their loved ones following something like this. And unfortunately, according to reporting that we are learning today, some people will not be able to do that tonight. CNN reporting 4 dead, about 30 injured. And again, these are numbers that we're continuing to watch because they have shifted some during the day. And we are working to get more concrete information, more details for you. But again, we are thinking that we may not get any information from the sheriff's office again until the 4 o'clock hour. That's about 3 hours from now as we're approaching, well, maybe two hours from now as we're approaching 2 o'clock here. And so again, we will be following that. We have several crews on the ground across Metro Atlanta working this story to get you answers, because so many people are really just asking so many questions, why and how. And those are the things that law enforcement are working together. You see right here images from earlier in the day, the students that were out there on that football field, such a stark contrast from what they were likely seeing and experiencing not too long ago. The school year just starting, just finishing up the Labor Day holiday, football back in action. And this is such a stark contrast from what these students were probably so excited about on campus, living their lives. And now this has happened, and it's really an event that really truly changes you and shakes you.
Yeah, it really does. And you're right. I mean, you look at the football field students, they should be getting ready for a Friday night football game. They should be getting ready for a test perhaps, but they are in the middle of just a chaotic emergent situation that has really dealt a huge blow, not only to this school, but this entire community. As we know, every school in the district, at least at some point today, was on lockdown because of this. We heard from Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens not too long ago in a statement saying that he has bolstered security at a number of Atlanta public schools and also offering to send any of Atlanta's resources that way as well, knowing that when something like this happens, it no doubt affects the school and the surrounding community. But as a parent, as a student anywhere, you are affected by this, especially when it happens within your metro area in particular.
And we talked so much about the injuries and how it's impossible at this point to know without concrete information from law enforcement what those injury levels are. But I can't help but continue to go back to the mental health aspect for these students. Some of them already reporting from family members and friends with our Molly Oak that they heard the gunshots across the hall. Some of these students may never have even heard gunshots before. And this is something that will be etched in their brains for the rest of their lives now. And so we are certainly thinking of these students and sending them our strength and support, because this is something that is going to be dealt with as an ongoing issue for the remainder of the school year and for the remainder of their lives as these students try to figure out how to move forward, as well as the staff and the teachers and the administrators there. Your school family is your family. You're with these people day in and day out for months on end. And in a community like Winder, you get to know each other. You know that your neighbors, everyone knows each other. And it's unimaginable, as you mentioned, that so many people there will have some sort of connection to what unfolded today.
And you wonder if perhaps the person that you had class with, or that you know well, or a teacher, is affected by this, because at this point we have not had any confirmation of the ages or the names or grade levels of any of the people who've been impacted. So for a lot of these students who are leaving today, they are left with just so many questions, left with heartbreak. But again, a lot of questions, wondering if perhaps their friend, someone they care about, someone they love, one of their teachers, is one of those impacted and perhaps even dead from this tragedy.
Yeah, and it's hard to say at this point, because we heard from one of the neighbors of a student that this may have taken place on the 10th grade hallway, but that student was a senior. And so it's even impossible with the limited information that we are getting on the ground to know who all may have been impacted. We don't know if there were staff members, teachers, students. We don't know the ratios of who may have been impacted here. So again, hopefully that is information that we will be able to bring to you in the next 2 hours or so when we hear from the sheriff's office once again. But again, as we talk about this situation, we know that this investigation is going to take quite some time. This isn't something that we're going to get all of the answers that we are looking for today or even tomorrow, as we know that the Barrow County Sheriff's Office is being joined by other local, state, and federal partners to investigate and try to piece together what happened.
And that next update, Jennifer, as we've been telling people, in case you were just joining us, according to the sheriff, he says we are going to try to get you another update at 4 o'clock. He didn't promise that would happen, but that's when they're hoping to get another update. He knows that you all want answers. And of course, media, we have our newscast at 4 o'clock. And so hoping to get the information out to you. But what we know so far, again, in case you were just tuning in, this all started around 9:30 this morning. That's when the first calls, according to police, came. They arrived on the scene shortly thereafter, realizing that this was an active shooter situation. And we saw police surrounding the school and agencies showing up from around the school. We do know one suspect now in custody. And according to CNN, they are now reporting 4 dead and approximately 30 injured. We know at least one of those injured was taken by medical helicopter or life flight to Grady Hospital, which is a level 1 trauma center. So that would lead you to believe that this was a serious injury, obviously. But we again don't know the extent of that injury.
All right, we want to get back out to some sound that our Doug Richards has been gathering, speaking with family members and students out there on the ground. And we understand this information comes from a 10th grader who heard what went on today. Let's take a listen.
It was just like a loud boom, as if a locker had slammed. So my teacher thought it was just like some kid acting foolish. So then she took a peek outside, and then we heard repeatedly the banging again, and that's when we could identify it was a gun. And then the hard lockdown was placed, and then we ran to the back of the classroom, turned off the lights. I was shaking, scared, and I didn't have my phone on me, and I couldn't communicate with my mom for half an hour. And I didn't know what was going to happen, because you could hear the gunfires right down the hall. So I don't know if it was like the last chance I had to talk with her, but luckily I'm here.
And you were just listening to a 10th grader at Appalachia High School speaking about his experience today when that gunfire rang out in the school, saying it sounded like a locker being banged shut, and they thought it was a one-off initially until the sound continued, and then they immediately went into those procedures that they practice about how to respond if a shooting happened, running to the back of the classroom, turning off the lights. Poor student saying he didn't even have a cell phone on him, so he couldn't reach his mother. And if you were looking at that screen, you could just tell the anguish that that mother had, even despite the joy of seeing her son right now and holding him. They were just holding on to each other, even as he spoke about what happened.
You could really feel it through the screen just looking at that image. And he told his story, again, turning off the lights, sort of hiding in place, waiting for this to all be over. We also heard from other students that they ran. They heard the gunfire, they heard something happening, and they ran. When you're trained in these sorts of drills, there's different scenarios and different ways that you handle this. Sometimes the best situation is to, lock the door and to hide in place. Other times it's to get away from the threat. And so some of these students doing what they were taught, trying to get away from what was happening. But it is just harrowing. It is just heartbreaking hearing that directly from a student who witnessed this just hours ago.
I know. And unfortunately, we will hear more and more stories like this as the days continue to move forward along with this investigation. But similar stories that we heard from another woman who was checking on her neighbor's son, that he was in that 10th grade hallway and heard the gunshots ringing out across from that classroom. And so we're starting to hear some similar stories out there of students taking cover as those gunshots ring out.
Right. It just really is. It's just hard to imagine going through that. As a lot of these students, you prepare for these things. You hope that you never have to actually do it in real time and in real life when a situation like this is unfolding. You're taking a look from above of our sky tracker. This was earlier, shortly after this happened, when a lot of the students were released out onto the football field. A lot of them at that point didn't know exactly what was going on. You can see, if you look lower in the picture, I believe that's a stretcher, one of many that we saw there on the scene. We saw several people, several students being taken away. We don't know, again, the extent of the injuries, but we know there were a number of students taken away by ambulance and by helicopter to be treated. And as of last reporting, CNN reporting 30 injured at this point, 4 dead.
And that's a number that has shifted as we have continued to follow this story for you today. Earlier in the day, NBC News reported 2 dead and 4 injured. But again, that number has increased to what CNN is reporting now was 4 dead and 30 injured. As you are looking at your screen, these are images from earlier in the day, and you can just see the sheer volume of law enforcement that responded out here to Appalachia High School early today, as this reports of what was reported to be a gunshot started to come in, starting around 9:30, those first calls today. We saw countless numbers of law enforcement vehicles. We now know that they are not just from that immediate area, but from all across Metro Atlanta, including state and federal partners as well, responding to this high school as this situation has continued to unfold and as this investigation is getting underway and continuing. We do know from the sheriff's office that 1 suspect is in custody, but there has not been any information from the sheriff's office on who that suspect is, whether it's a student, a teacher. We don't have information from the sheriff's office, at least, about any particular descriptors of who that person is, an age, a reason for their connection to the school, if there even was one. So those are just some of the questions that still remain at this hour that we are hoping to get for you. Again, we are hoping that we may hear from the sheriff again around 4 o'clock. Again, that is something we will bring to you both on air and online as soon as we get the word that we will hear from the sheriff, if and when that does happen again.
And Jennifer, you're absolutely correct. We don't have much information at this hour on the suspect other than that person is in custody, according to the sheriff. Now, CNN is reporting, according to some of their law enforcement sources, that suspect is of student age. That's how they described them, but not, again, saying whether they were or are a student at the school or have any connection to the school. But at this point, we do know that young person, according to CNN, is in custody.
And we see our Molly Oga standing by. She's getting ready for another live report just to kind of let us know what she is hearing and seeing out there on the ground at Appalachia High School. Molly, are you ready?
Hey guys, so we've talked about the amount of law enforcement out here. We've talked about the amount of parents out here. Well, now we're seeing students and talking with them as well. I just talked with one kid. He's a 10th grade student. He told me he heard the gunfire. I'm going to step aside because we are right across from the high school. So you can again see just all the amount of law enforcement that's here. Gwinnett County even passing me now. So again, local, state, and federal all here today. But that 10th grader telling me that he started hearing gunshots. His teacher told them to get down and get in the corner. He recounted that he was just about to go to the bathroom. And the words he told me were, "I thought I was going to die." It's tough for me to talk about this one because I have shared a lot of hugs off camera right now with parents and students who are okay, but we know there are some parents who are not getting that news. That student did tell me that he knows a couple of the people that were shot. He's worried that one of the people he thinks was shot is also one of the ones that died. So our thoughts and prayers are going out to not only the students, the staff, the faculty, but the parents and really this entire community. Because as we said, it's not only parents that are coming out here to come check on the kids, it's neighbors, it's grandparents, it's loved ones, it's friends. We talked with one neighbor who said she walked 2.5 miles just to come and check on her friend's kid to make sure that he was okay and just lay some eyes on him. She had told me that he was in the principal's office and the principal told him to run and not look back. We've talked with other students and parents who have said that they heard the gunshots, parents getting the text from their kids, not even wanting to believe it's real, and then questioning if they were going to get to see their kid. They're finally getting to see and touch and feel that they're okay for some parents out here, but there is a ton of emotion. I think we have some sound from you for some of those students. I want to toss that now if we can get that. So we are still working on getting that sound, but again, just the overall emotion here for not only the students, but the parents, but also the law enforcement. You really feel a sense of heaviness out here outside of the high school today, guys.
All right, Molly, and let us know when you're ready with that sound, because we really would love to hear from some of the people with their reactions and their emotions and what they saw and heard tonight, or really rather earlier in the day as this unfolds. So Molly, thank you so much. We can certainly feel from you the emotion of the day out there. So much going through the minds and hearts of the people out here in Barrow County as this continues.
It really does take on a different type of emotion when you start hearing the words directly from those students. And Molly and Doug and some of our other reporters out there have been talking directly to students. We just heard from, according to Molly, that student saying that they were told to get in the corner and they could hear the gunfire. And they believe that someone they know was shot, and perhaps one of the ones who was fatally injured. And that's when it really gets real for a lot of people, because it's not just a shooting. This is someone you know. This is someone you have class with. And just to hear that from students, I think really you can understand why it brings that type of emotion out.
Potentially someone you may have grown up with and gone to elementary, middle, and now high school with. And we hear these situations all across the country so many times. And as you said, it just becomes real when it's right here in your own community. We do know that this story is having wide-reaching effects. We heard from U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland earlier making comments and sending his thoughts and offering assistance. But right now, we also understand that the White House will be providing a briefing very shortly. We will, of course, bring you that as soon as we know somebody comes and steps to the stadium. We understand President Joe Biden has been briefed on everything that's going on. It's not clear right now who from the White House will be speaking, but again, we will bring you that as soon as we see someone moving toward the podium. But again, this just signals how serious of a situation this really has become as it continues to balloon. Unfortunately, we have seen the numbers increase and reporting from CNN, 4 dead, 30 injured. And we will, of course, bring you this briefing as soon as it gets underway.
And we're also expecting to hear from the sheriff in Winder around 4 o'clock this afternoon, perhaps before that. But that's when we're told the next update could come. So again, we are awaiting news updates from both the White House and from the law enforcement there in Winder. And I wouldn't be surprised to, at some point today, hear from Governor Brian Kemp. He did release a statement, but knowing him, he will likely either be there later today or at least issue some type of statement, considering how serious this has gotten to be.
Exactly. And again, we have been hearing from law enforcement and state officials across Georgia who have been sending their support and their thoughts to the Barrow County community following news of this shooting out there. at Appalachia High School. You're looking at images that we got from earlier in the day, some of them from the ground, some of them from our 11 Alive Sky Tracker, as we have been keeping an eye on what has been going on and learning more and more information as the hours have passed. This image right here on your screen gives you a view of what we've been talking about, just the sheer volume of law enforcement responding to this situation, not just from Barrow County, but also from surrounding areas. And not just law enforcement, we also know that first responders from other communities were sharing the load as well, working to help in response to this shooting, what we understand is a shooting. And we are just now seeing that the GBI has now confirmed 4 people dead, 9 hospitalized. That information coming again from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation of 4 people dead, 9 hospitalized. We heard earlier in the day from Grady Hospital that they had at least one person who had a gunshot wound that had been transported from Barrow County to Atlanta for treatment at Grady Hospital. And again, we are just working to get you new details, new information, piece by piece, as it continues to come in and be confirmed.
And as you mentioned earlier, Jennifer, we don't know the extent of those injuries. 9 hospitalized would lead you to believe that there is some type of injury where, of course, they would need to be seeking medical care, but there could have been other students who were hurt, perhaps in the chaos of running. We just don't know. So that could be perhaps why we saw some of the larger numbers with 30 injured, according to CNN. But again, the latest information from the GBI that we can confirm: 4 dead, 9 hospitalized, and the suspect, again, if you were just joining us, is in custody. We do not know any details about who that suspect is or any details about what led up to the shooting today that happened, according to police, around 9:30 today. We have been hearing on the ground within the last hour from a lot of students who witnessed this. We have heard that it happened, according to students, around the 10th grade hallway. Several students reported hearing the gunfire this morning. Students telling us that they ran in the corner, they turned off the lights. Many of them ran for cover if they were in an area where they could do so. But this is all contained, according to police at this point. And now the investigation really starts as to what happened here, why it happened, and interviewing those students who are still at the school is a big part of figuring all of that out.
And you mentioned those interviews. We heard from a neighbor who was checking on a friend's child out there at Appalachia High School that the GBI is, in fact, interviewing students out there at this hour. We know that the unification process has begun and that some family members are being reunited with their students. But we also know that some students are being held back so that they can, in fact, be interviewed, so that the GBI can learn from those students what they saw, what they may have heard, what they may have viewed, and any sort of information that they may have that can help with this investigation. So we are learning that some of that is undergoing and in process out there at Appalachia High School.
And again, we are still waiting to hear from the White House, I believe we're going to go straight to the White House for an update from the White House. Let's listen in.
Yet another horrific shooting. Now, as a parent myself, I know the anxiety that comes with sending your kid out into the world every day, living with the real fear of the worst can happen. So please know that our hearts are with those families in Winder, Georgia, who are forced to face this act of senseless violence. I want to let you know that the president and the vice president have both been briefed, and his administration will continue coordinating with federal, state, and local officials as we receive more information. We're grateful for the brave first responders who are on the scene, and we stand ready to provide support as needed. As the president has said time and time again, this is not normal. This is not normal. Students and teachers deserve to know that their schools are safe. They should focus on learning, not lockdowns. While the president and vice president have taken historic action to reduce gun violence, more must be done to keep our schools and communities safe. We continue to call on Congress to do something, We need universal background checks. We need ban to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, require safe storage of firearms, invest in violence prevention programs, and pass a national red flag law. Enough is enough. And I cannot say this enough, which is enough is enough. We cannot allow this to happen in our communities. We cannot allow this to happen in our schools. So we have to do everything that we can to keep our children safe, to keep the people who are supposed to protect our children, where our children, who are they supposed to learn from, safe. And enough is enough. Congress needs to act. Now, turning to my colleague from NSC, who's here to discuss the latest Biden-Harris administration actions today against foreign actors attempting to covertly influence our elections and undermine confidence in our democratic institution. Admiral John Kirby will discuss the coordinated actions we are taking in addition to other foreign policy news of the day. Admiral?
And you have been listening to Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, speaking about this unfolding shooting at Appalachia High School. Right now, we have confirmed with the GBI that 4 people are dead and 9 hospitalized. And the White House press secretary saying that their hearts are with families, that President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have been briefed on the situation. She called this a senseless act of violence, saying that she is grateful for first responders, but also saying that this is not normal and that more must be done. She said enough is enough and called on Congress, saying they need to act, and also mentioned some specific things like universal background checks and violence prevention programs that do need to happen. But again, that's what we are just hearing from the White House press secretary in response to the shooting at Appalachia High School in Barrow County, Georgia.
And just as the press secretary was speaking, President Biden and the White House also releasing a statement reiterating some of the same things that he said, really saying that what should have been a joyous back to school season in Winder has now turned into another horrific reminder of how gun violence continues to tear our communities apart. The president going on to say, in part with this statement, students across the country are learning how to duck and cover instead of how to read and write. We cannot continue to accept this as normal. And that is what we heard from Karine Jean-Pierre saying twice, reiterating this is not normal. But sadly, this has become something that some of us have become all too familiar with seeing, as we have seen yet another school shooting happen, this time right here in our community.
And again, we do want to reiterate that we are just confirming within the last 30 minutes or so with the GBI that 4 people have lost their lives today at Appalachia High School as a result of this. 9 people hospitalized. We do not know at this hour the extent of the injuries of those who have been hospitalized, but we are working to gather more information. We heard from the sheriff earlier today. Not many details given there, but we are expecting and hoping that we will hear from the sheriff once again around 4 o'clock. And we'll, of course, bring you that briefing as soon as it begins, just as we did with that briefing from the White House. And
Jennifer, you mentioned earlier a lot of people who've been watching our coverage and who were tuning in just a few hours ago. You could see just how serious this was. It seemed, sort of every 15 minutes we would see, another sort of group of law enforcement show up, more ambulances. We saw the medical helicopters, leading us to believe that this was a lot more serious than the initial call perhaps suggested. And again, these numbers really underscoring that 4 dead, 9 hospitalized, perhaps more than that even injured, according to some other reporting we've heard. But this time, 2:25, this has been unfolding since about 9:30 this morning, and there's still a lot of answers we don't have, and we may not have those answers today, and maybe not even by the end of this week. The sheriff suggesting that this is still very early, still very fluid, and he said that he may be able to give some additional information when they talk to us around 4 o'clock. But at this point, we're just going to have to wait and see what else we learn today.
We have learned from the sheriff's office that 1 suspect is in custody. We do know that. However, we have not received any information from the sheriff's office about who that suspect might be. We don't have any concrete information, at least not from the sheriff's office, about if this person is a student or not, if this person had any connection to the school. We do not have any of those details at this hour. But once we do learn them, we will, of course, share them with you both on air and online. But that's just one piece of this that we are waiting and hoping to hear soon as more and more people are hopefully being reunited with their students out there on Appalachia High School campus. And we do know that some of those students are being held back in order to assist in this investigation, to speak with members of law enforcement, particularly with the GBI. And again, this is something you see right here on your screen, this visual from earlier today, the sheer number of students that were evacuated out of that school, taken to the football court, or the football field there for a safe space until they could be reunited. And so that is underway right now. We have heard from some family members and friends who say their student is being interviewed. And again, that reunification process is also underway. We've heard from our Molly Oak out there on the ground with one parent at least saying that she walked 2.5 miles just to get to the school to make sure that her child was okay.
We've heard that, and we've heard neighbors stepping in where perhaps parents could not get to the school as quickly, and neighbors saying, I'll go check on your child just to make sure they're okay. Parents, again, have been allowed for the last couple hours or so to go and reunite with their students. Sadly, some of them won't be able to do that, as we have heard that 4 dead and 9 hospitalized. We don't have the breakdown on how many of those who are injured or those casualties are students. But what we have been hearing for the last hour or so, direct accounts, direct stories from students who were nearby or in the 10th grade hallway and heard the gunfire. Perhaps some of them even saw this unfold. One of the students we just heard from about 30 minutes ago said that he could hear the gunfire. He ran into the corner. The teacher turned off the light and they waited for this all to be over with, not realizing just how horrible this would turn out to be. That student also saying that he was about to go to the bathroom, but he didn't. And he hid in the classroom. And other students earlier in the day saying that they ran because they didn't know what was going on. So we're starting to hear more firsthand accounts as these stories are also being shared directly with law enforcement as they try to figure out the exact details and the timing of how this unfolded.
And Jonathan, not too long ago, we heard from a student holding on to his mother, a 10th grade student, sharing his account of what he experienced today, hearing those gunshots in the hallway. But you could just see them holding on to each other. And I think that's what so many families will be doing tonight, those who can. And unfortunately, we know there are those who will not be able to do that tonight, with the GBI now confirming 4 people have been killed.
As we heard from our Molly Oak, who is still there on the scene, a considerable police presence still there. We do know, according to the sheriff, that the scene there at the high school is contained. They have the suspect in custody, but their investigation still is very much starting. They need to figure out many more details. They're collecting evidence. They're talking with students. So I would assume that they're going to be there for a long time. This is still early. Even though this happened hours ago, they still have a lot of people to talk to and a lot of ground to cover as they try to figure out what happened, perhaps even reviewing if there were any sort of cameras in the school, what happened and how this happened and unfolded.
And I'm just looking on social media. The GBI again has confirmed 4 dead, 9 people taken to what they're saying are various hospitals with injuries. There's no direct information, no confirmation about the type of injuries that some of these people have sustained. The GBA also tweeting out on or posting on X that the suspect is in custody and that person is alive. There seem to have been some reports that a suspect had been quote unquote neutralized, but the GBI saying that that information is inaccurate. So we can verify that a suspect is alive and in custody right now. Again, that information coming from the GBI.
And perhaps we'll learn more about that suspect when we hear from the sheriff around 4 o'clock this afternoon. A lot of people had questions. In fact, our Doug Richards asked, is the suspect a student? Is it an adult? Is that person a student at the school or have any affiliation with the school? The sheriff saying he's not ready to answer those questions just yet. But that's a question that we have asked. We're also waiting to get more information about other schools that have been placed on lockdown earlier today. Every single school in Barrow County had been on lockdown right after this unfolded. the sheriff said one of their goals in the next couple hours was to release some of those students. I guess they're going to do that, orderly, because they obviously don't want every parent in the district racing to the schools at once. So when we get updates on how that release and how that lockdown will be lifted at those other schools, we'll keep you updated on that as well.
And of course, that is something that would typically be standard with any sort of situation, these lockdowns. And, Jonathan, we were talking earlier in the broadcast here that normally if there is something, we do hear about schools going into lockdown, even if it has nothing to do with the school. They may place a school on lockdown if there's police activity in the nearby vicinity, just to make sure that they're taking an abundance of caution. But earlier in the day, when we heard the word hard lockdown, I think that was a signal to so many of us that this was a different type of situation, that this was more serious. And unfortunately, that has turned out to be true. The GBI confirming 4 dead, 9 hospitalized at various hospitals across our metro Atlanta region, if you were just joining us. And again, we have learned that a suspect is in custody. That person is alive, but we don't have any other confirmed details about who that suspect is. We are expecting to hear from the sheriff's office, hopefully around 4 o'clock. We did hear from the sheriff earlier today, not many details shared with us at that point. The sheriff saying that he hopes to speak again around 4 o'clock and hopes to be able to provide more information and hopes to, at that point, be able to answer questions from the media. And we'll, of course, bring you that as soon as we get word that it is coming and as soon as we get word that it is about to take place.
Again, the sheriff really the only one at this point authorized to speak on the investigation, but we have heard and received statements from Governor Brian Kemp along with Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens, emphasizing the resources from the Atlanta area will be sent to this area, along with additional patrols being stepped up at Atlanta public schools in light of what's happened. We also, within the last 20 minutes, heard from the White House, from the press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, and others. But again, the only specific information about the investigation has been coming from the sheriff. And around 4 o'clock, he's expected to provide another update on that from Winder. Again, as I said, I would not be surprised to hear from Governor Brian Kemp again this afternoon as well.
I think that is something that we will likely get at some point later on this evening. And of course, we'll bring you that both on air and online as it comes in from Governor Brian Kemp or anybody else. We will share those thoughts and those messages with you as well. Jonathan, you mentioned that the White House mentioned this during a briefing not too long ago. We brought you that live here just a few moments ago. The press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, saying that their hearts are with families. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have been briefed on this ongoing situation, calling this an act of senseless violence, saying that they are grateful for first responders and all the hard work that is being done in response, but saying that this is not normal and more must be done.
Right now, you were looking at some video from earlier this afternoon, shortly after this all unfolded at the high school. Again, the first calls came in around 9:30 this morning. Police were quickly on the scene around 10 o'clock or a little before, and we started seeing the police presence grow, really presence from all over our state. We saw officers from Gwinnett County, of course, the city of Atlanta, ATF, GBI, really any agency that you can think of was on the scene or is still on the scene earlier today as they really worked to not only secure the area and figure out what was going on, but also to transport those who were injured to where they needed to be. We saw a number of medical helicopters also showing up on the scene. But again, the latest information we can confirm, according to the GBI, is 4 dead and 9 hospitalized, perhaps more than that even injured. We're waiting for another update to come in from the sheriff in Winder.
And we saw from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation posting on X that these people have been taken to various hospitals. We know from Grady Hospital earlier in today that they have at least one patient who suffered a gunshot wound from Appalachian High School. That number may have increased at this point. And we also don't have further confirmation about where else these people have been taken other than the GBI saying that 9 people have been hospitalized at various facilities across our metro Atlanta region. We will bring you that information as soon as we get that confirmation. But right now, now, what we do know is that families are being reunited with their students, both at Appalachia High School, but also that's working to be done at other schools in Barrow County, as well as other schools were placed on lockdown as a result of this ongoing situation. We do know at this hour that some students are being held back while others have been reunited because these students are speaking with investigators or speaking with the GBI about what they saw, what they witnessed, what they heard, maybe any information that they may have that might assist them in that investigation. So that process is underway today as well.
That's right. And Jennifer, you mentioned we do know at least one of those gunshot victims is at Grady Memorial Hospital, a level 1 trauma center. CNN also reporting, according to their sources, that at least one adult has been taken to Piedmont Athens Regional Hospital in North Georgia, but we don't know the extent of the injuries of that person. We just know, again, that, as you mentioned, these victims have been taken to multiple hospitals. So again, we are at least knowing between Grady and that hospital in the Athens area as well.
And we know that there are so many questions that so many of you have at home as you're watching this, as you're reaching out to loved ones, and we are working to confirm as much of that information as we can and bring it to you as soon as we have it, both here on air and then online on 11alive.com and inside our 11 Alive news app. We are working to get you that information as soon as it comes in. We also do want to share with you, if you're just joining us, that we are hoping that we can hear from the sheriff's office once again around 4 o'clock, and we will carry that for you both on air and online.
And as we know, with situations like this is truly breaking news. Things can change, as we have seen them change really hour by hour. We have learned more information. We have, in terms of where the lockdowns stand, in terms of the number of hospitalized, injured, and those who unfortunately are dead from this situation. This is all unfolding. It is changing. We are working. We have our newsroom working. We have reporters there on the ground at the hospital waiting and trying to gather more information as well. So we are bringing you the very latest just as soon as we get that information as well.
And Jonathan, I'm just getting some information from our newsroom that there will be a Winder community vigil tonight at 7 p.m. This is going to take place at Jug Tavern Park. That's at 113 East Athens Street in Winder, Georgia. The city of Winder is going to open Jug Tavern Park. This is going to be opened up to the community tonight at 7 for an opportunity for everyone to come together and grieve over everything that has taken place today. Grieve those 4 lives lost, according to the GBI, and I'm sure offer up some prayers and support for those who have been hospitalized and the families who have lost loved ones out there today. So again, this is a Winder community vigil, the city opening up Jug Tavern Park to the community this evening at 7 p.m. for that community vigil. So if you are one who is in that area or you'd like to travel to that area to offer your respects and to offer your support, that would be an opportune time to do it at Jug Tavern Park, 7 p.m. tonight. That is 113 East Athens Street in Winder, Georgia.
Yeah, and you can imagine that a lot of comfort, a lot of prayers, a lot of support will be needed in that community, not just tonight at this vigil, but beyond in the weeks and months to come. After something like this, just, it really does rock the community for an incredible time. I want to go out right now to 11 Alive's Doug Richards. Doug, you have been there at the high school really for a couple of hours now. You've been speaking with students and with some of the parents out there. What else are you learning?
Well, we're learning that the students, based on their own characterization of what happened, had a very traumatic experience, and that there was, as some of them said, hard to know initially what was going on. When they heard the initial gunshots, it was hard to know exactly that's what that was. But then we talked to some students who were in a classroom adjacent to where at least some of the shooting took place, and they had very traumatic experiences. Hearing the gunshots, not really knowing whether the gunshots were going to get closer to them, but recognizing that it was gunfire, seeing signs on the displays that are in each classroom that said that they were on a hard lockdown and indicating that there was a genuine emergency taking place, the teachers putting them into the lockdown protocol where they piled into corners of classrooms in order to sort of minimize the possible exposure as targets. We talked with the one young lady by the name of Zoe Gray, who described what she went through in her classroom. Was there ever any moment when you thought you were in danger?
Oh yeah, I thought I was gonna die. It was like, it sounded so close. I'm sure it was, because it was right near. I don't know exactly which door, but you hear bang, bang, like they're kind of like they're trying to get in a door. It wasn't our door, but I'm sitting right by the door. And so it sounds like they're trying to get in, but I don't know if it's shots or they're just trying to get in. We were just having a normal day. It wasn't anything different than what we were used to. They usually make you put up your phone, but I was charging mine today, so I luckily had it, and that was just normal. And then bang, 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 hard lockdown. And the teachers were phenomenal. Like, we have a special teacher for the blind kid, and then we have our normal teacher, and they were very good at doing their job of keeping us calm.
I talked with probably a half dozen students as they were leaving here. Many of them were with their parents, and the parents gave their blessings just to talk to them. Almost all of them said that they were convinced that there was more than one gunman. One student told us that they heard shots from different locations within the school. One student told us that when they exited out the hall, actually a couple of students told us when they exited out the hallway, they saw the body of somebody in the hallway who they believed to be one of the student gunmen. So we know that the GBI is telling us that one gunman is in custody. The students at least left here convinced that there was more than one gunman, and that there was and that one of them was killed by police in the course of the investigation. The authorities have not confirmed that, and the students are saying it just based on their observations. Student told us that the one person that they believed was a gunman laying deceased in the hallway actually had a firearm, which she described as an assault rifle, on the ground with him when they led the students past the person deceased in the hallway. So it's hard to tell. Nobody knew. We talked to one student who said that he knew a gunman casually, didn't describe anything particularly unusual about this particular person who he believed was a gunman. But there's a lot of information flying around, obviously, in here, some of which may not be true, but some of which is gathered by people who said they saw firsthand in the hallway as they were evacuating their classrooms, just based on evidence that they saw. The good news, of course, is that it appears the danger's over. The students are casually exiting the school now, mostly with their parents, very relieved that this is over, and not planning to come back to school tomorrow is what they're telling us. Back to you.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. And we do want to give you some information from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. They are saying that the suspect in this shooting is in custody and that person is alive. They say that reports that the suspect has been neutralized are inaccurate. They're also saying that reports of additional shootings taking place at nearby schools are incorrect. Again, any reports of additional shootings taking place at nearby schools in Barrow County are not correct. That information coming from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. They're posting this information on X to kind of refute some information that misinformation that is out there. But again, the suspect is in custody. The suspect is alive. Any reports that the suspect has been neutralized are inaccurate, and any reports of additional shootings at nearby schools are also incorrect.
And we will likely hear that emphasized coming up in a bit when we hear from the sheriff in Winder. any moment now, perhaps around 4 o'clock, though that's around the time we're expecting. So probably actually more looking at an hour from now. But again, Jennifer, you're reiterating that because we have heard a lot of information. Sometimes it is misinformation. Sometimes it is rumors. When things like this happen, you have a lot of students who witness things firsthand, students who heard something second or third hand from someone. And so there's a lot of information going around in addition to what we hear and see on social media. So the information we're providing to you is coming directly from the GBI or from law enforcement sources. And as soon as we confirm things or can, sort of knock something out that has been put out there, we can let you know that as well.
All right. And once again, what we have learned, we just want to be very crystal clear with this. The GBI has confirmed 4 people have died. 9 people have been transported to various hospitals, but the suspect is alive and in custody, and there are no shootings that have taken place as a result at surrounding schools. Jonathan, we've been talking about the reunification process going on, not just here at Appalachia High School, but also at other schools in Barrow County. Those processes are undergoing right now. They're underway as parents are being reunited with their students, because we know those other schools were placed on lockdown as well as a result of this shooting.
That's right. At one point, every school in Barrow County was placed on lockdown. The sheriff did say one of their goals in the next bit was to make sure that those lockdowns could be lifted and students could be reunited with their parents. We're talking about elementary schools and middle schools, so some younger students in that area. And in addition to what's happening here at the high school, where students were allowed to leave campus with their parents shortly after this happened, once they got the scene clear and got things contained. But again, the investigation far from over. In fact, it's just starting, according to the sheriff. And that is why you are still seeing a ton of police presence at the school, because they have a lot of work to do to get to the bottom of what happened, including interviewing a lot of these students. In particular, we're told a lot of the 10th grade students, because according to witnesses we've spoken to, this happened on the 10th grade hallway in the school. Many of the students actually telling us that they heard the gunfire. They had to run for cover. They turned off the lights in the classroom. They ducked, just trying to figure out what may be going on. So we're getting some of those firsthand accounts from students as really the hours go by.
We also heard from a senior who just so happened to have a class on that 10th grade hall. And so it really is difficult to know what type of student, what range of age or grade may have been more heavily impacted by this shooting directly, who may have been closer to what transpired. But again, we're receiving various accounts from students, from our reporters on the ground there at Appalachia High School, and we are just sharing with you their accounts. I can't get out of my mind, Jonathan, the mother and son just holding on to each other. The mother didn't even say a word. She allowed her son to share what he experienced. He talked about it sounding like a locker being slammed, and they thought initially that it might be somebody just fooling around in the hallway until the sound continued, and then they heard about the hard lockdown, and that is what drove all of the students to the back of the classroom, as you mentioned, to turn off the lights until they were able to leave. And we've said that this is something that students practice for nowadays, but practicing for something like this and it actually unfolding in your actual life is a completely different situation.
Very different. Perhaps we can even get our producers to get that soundbite recue to run a little bit, because I think was so emotional, and I think gripping to really see that mom and her son right next to each other, really giving a firsthand account of what he saw, and then you saw her emotion just in her face, just listening and seeing the visual and the audio from that was just probably the most emotional thing I've seen so far in our coverage. So we'll see if our producers can get that back up. But again, a lot of answers we just don't have at this hour. This all started to unfold around 9:30 this morning, but here we are going into the 3 o'clock hour and still waiting for some specific answers as to exactly how many people were truly affected by this. We know, according to the GBI, 4 dead, 9 hospitalized, but perhaps more people have been affected by this in terms of physically, in terms of injuries. But we know this community is just shaken. It is rocked by this. And tonight, as you mentioned, there will be a community vigil happening, I believe, around 7 o'clock.
Yeah, 7 o'clock, Jug Tavern Park. 7 p.m. That is 113 East Athens Street in Winder, Georgia. That is where that community vigil will be taking place tonight for anyone who wants to attend and show their love and support following this shooting. Jonathan, I'm hearing from our producers that we do have that sound once again. Take a listen and take a look, if you can, just to feel what this family, this mother and son, were experiencing following today's shooting.
It was just like a loud boom as if a locker had slammed. So my teacher thought it was just like some kid acting foolish. So then she took a peek outside, and then we heard repeatedly the banging again, and that's when we could identify it was the gun. And then the hard lockdown was placed, and then we ran to the back of the classroom, turned off the lights. I was shaking, scared, and I didn't have my phone on me, and I couldn't communicate with my mom for half an hour. And I didn't know what was going to happen because you could hear the gunfires right down the hall. So I don't know if it was like the last chance I had to talk with her, but luckily I'm here.
Luckily, he is here. And you could hear as he was recounting those moments, the mom, you could just see it in her face, kind of reliving probably what she had felt just moments ago before she knew that her son was there and he was okay. And that is the story, that is the scene of so many parents who are showing up today. Some of them still showing up to the school, picking up their children. I would assume that many of them by now have shown up already. But for many who are not as fortunate as that mother to be able to hug their kids tonight, those are the people we've got to think about. A lot of people, a lot of family members affected by what happened.
Certainly. And we've been hearing from our reporters there on the ground, speaking with students, speaking with family members, trying to get a hold of their students. Some parents telling us they walked for more than 2 miles to get to the school because there is, as you see right here from earlier, such a heavy police and law enforcement presence there on the ground at Appalachia High School. Parents just parking anywhere they could and saying, I'm going to walk on foot. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get to my child on this school's campus following these reports of the shooting, something that parents never want to hear about. They never want to get that message. And unfortunately, we heard from several students today who said either it took them a long time to get to their phone or they did not have access to their phone. And that can only imagine just added to the agony for those students and for their parents looking for information, looking for confirmation from their student that they were okay.
Yeah, just to be in that situation and feel sort of helpless, not having that communication just makes it, I'm sure, so much more heartbreaking and really just scary, to say the least. We do know that we are expecting another update, as we keep telling you, from the sheriff. So please stay with us here this afternoon because that could come within the next hour. We have already heard through statements from Governor Brian Kemp, Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens, and U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland, who spoke earlier, along with Karine Jean-Pierre from the White House, the press secretary. The president also issuing a statement shortly thereafter, really reiterating what she said earlier. And I think the thing that stood out to me in the president's statement saying we cannot continue to accept this as normal because we cover these. And this time it happened here in Georgia, in our community, but it happens far too often elsewhere as well.
Far too frequently. The press secretary saying this is not normal. And unfortunately, we know that this situation may take political undertones at some point, but I think we can all agree that this is not anything that anyone wants to see in their community or in any community.
All right. Right now, we want to go to one of our reporters, our Zach Merchant. I believe Zach is live right now at Northeast Medical Center, Northeast Georgia Medical Center. Zach, we know that the victims have been taken to a number of hospitals. What is happening where you are?
Right, Jonathan, if you take a look right behind me, we're in front of Northeast Georgia Medical Center's Barrow location. This is where a Northeast Georgia Health System spokesperson confirms that one gunshot victim from today's school shooting was transported. Another gunshot victim, he says, was transported to Northeast Georgia Medical Center's Gainesville location. That spokesperson tells us that that Gainesville location is a level 1 trauma center. For those of you who might not know, I know you've unfortunately today been hearing that phrase a lot. Level 1 trauma centers are the highest prepared, most ready to handle serious trauma, injuries, and incidents hospitals across the state. This spokesperson we talked to today had no more information than that. He couldn't provide the names, the ages, the male or female, the gender, the sex of those who are injured, or importantly, their condition. But we do know that, again, 2 people are being transported and are actually being treated right now at Northeast Georgia Health System hospitals. Importantly, as we talk about this community here in Barrow, it's a small community. A lot of people know folks who were involved, who were affected by what happened today. We told you we're right in front of the Northeast Georgia Medical Center. Well, the parking lot we are in, we spoke with 2 18-year-old men. They say they both just graduated from Winder Barrow High School just in the spring. They say, as you'd expect, they say they are afraid that some people who they may know may have been affected by the shooting at Appalachia High School today. They say they're watching closely to see, as we learn names and identities of those who were injured, those who were hurt, and those who were tragically killed. They're watching closely, afraid that some of those names they'll recognize. They say they went to Winder Barrow, but they've been to Appalachia many times for high school football games and other events. Talk about how close this community is, how many connections there are. One of the men we spoke to, his name is Christian Kinna. He says earlier today, his younger sister, who is still a high school student,